May I now request Mr. Suresh Yadav, Director, Climate Change and Oceans Directorate at the Commonwealth Secretariat. Thank you. Orgo Senaroy, Director, Climate Change, Asian Development Bank. I would like to invite Chitembo Kamimbe Chunga, the Lead Resilience Climate Investment Funds from SIF. Thank you very much for joining us today. And finally, Ede Ijaz, the lead coordinating author for CDRI, the second Global Infrastructure Resilience Report, and also the ex-director, Global Director of Environment in World Bank. And finally, we have Timon Pearson, Professor of Environmental Studies, New York University. So thank you everyone for joining us today. This panel discussion focuses on capacity building for resilient infrastructure. Capacity building is a very important mandate of CDRI. And for almost the whole last week and even this week since Monday, we have been hearing from different levels how important it is to build the capacities of countries on investing, on resilient infrastructure investments, as well as kind of across the sectors on how to embed resilience in the infrastructure sector at the planning stage, design stage, and also in terms of financing and technologies. So with that background, and maybe a little more on what CDRI is actually doing in this space, for us, when we talk about capacity building, we are focusing on three particular areas. We are trying to look at how do we enhance the knowledge and skills of the infrastructure professionals and all other relevant stakeholders in our member countries. And for that, we have been implementing bespoke training programs for our member countries. We actually organize online courses, master classes, webinars, and also developing training modules. So that's how we are working towards it. The second is we are also focusing on promoting experiential learning, and we are trying to do that through cutting-edge research. We have our fellowship program through which every year we provide a seed grant of 15,000 USD to young researchers, academicians, and even professionals from the government to do cutting-edge research on infrastructure resilience. The Global Infrastructure Resilience Report that we produced and launched yesterday is also a part of this endeavor, where we are promoting deep research in the field of infrastructure resilience. And then, of course, we also run a community of practices. We already have a knowledge management portal. We call it DRI Connect. And through this platform, we try to connect with large number of practitioners, experts, policymakers to have, very deliberate discourse around infrastructure resilience. The third area where we work is largely in encouraging collaboration and peer learning. And we do that by organizing peer learning visits, running this community of practices, and also using our knowledge management platform. So that's what we are doing. What we plan to do today in this panel discussion is kind of trying to have a shared understanding on how capacity building initiatives can help to fill the capacity gaps. Because yesterday, I know many of you who were there a part of the Global Infrastructure Resilience Report launch. One of the pilot surveys that we did with more than 3,000 professionals across the world, one finding that emerged is that the institutional and the human resource capacity varies greatly from country to country. So that's the gap. There is a huge gap in that area. Many a times it's the private sectors and the donor agencies who provide that, technical support and the capacity support to the countries, and those support mechanisms are withdrawn once the donor project gets over and the private sector leaves the country by completing the assignment. So this is a challenge we found through our report. Additionally, what we also realized that when we talk about building capacity for infrastructure resilience, it is not only the infrastructure professionals. You have to work with a large number of stakeholders, so it will include professionals from planning ministry, finance ministry, communities, businesses, private sector, DRM agencies. Then only we can actually build the real capacity on infrastructure resilience. So the whole idea of today's panel discussion is to have a collective understanding on how do we go about it and what that CDRI can do in collaboration with many of the partners who are here today, and in addition to the other relevant partners. So with that background, maybe I start with my first question, which is a very broad question. And I would like to request Mr. Yadav and Orgho to specifically answer to this question, which is like, what are the global good practices where capacity development has actually enabled governments to implement meaningful resilience actions on ground? Because you both, Mr. Yadav, you come from Commonwealth Secretariat, so the kind of projects that you have been supporting, how you have been able to support capacity development and kind of institutionalized and mainstreamed it. And again, Orgo, I would request you to bring in the perspective from the ADB. So Mr. Yadav, to you first. I have to give you a mic. Yeah, thanks.
Thank you, Rajni, and good morning to all of you. First of all, it's a real pleasure to be here in the CDRI Pavilion. I'm coming here for the first time, so I really enjoyed the color and the maps here on the Pavilion. Fantastic! Congratulations for that. Secondly, I want to congratulate you for a very fantastic multi-stakeholder model, because your capacity development itself is multi-dimensional, takes into account the all the stakeholders as a part of the five-pillar eco approach. So that's a very fantastic approach. In my experience, both as working in the government, working in the multilateral agencies in the global south as well as in the north, it has been that if you are able to do a capacity building which is continuous in nature, not only in terms of learning, but embedding the best technological solutions flowing from the private sector as well as from the academics, that makes something which is sustainable. The other experience which we have is that to what extent you are able to embed the young people into the whole process of capacity development, particularly in the area where CDRI is working. So this one not only leads to the continuation of the capacity developed from the generation to generation, but it also mainstream the young people that, and the women in the whole architecture of the capacity building, which leads to the sustenance, which leads to the permanence, and also the future generation to participate not only by in the talk, but by active participation. So these are the few experience which we have, and we have been supporting a good number of countries, even in the collaboration with the CDRI in Africa, and our experience has been very, very positive. So thank you very much for this question, Rajni, and over to you.
Thank you. Thank you. Maybe Orgo, I would like you to intervene first and then.
Thanks, Ranjini, and thanks for having us. So I think from our experience, there are three things maybe worth highlighting, and Suresh added also. One is capacity building cannot be projectized. It has to be a continuous long-term support embedded in the national institutions that have the relevant mandate, objectives of such. But in doing so, one has to realize the problem with resilience is, yes, you can reduce the capacity gap, but you have to continuously learn, because the risk landscape unfortunately will continually change. So you have to always keep learning and adjust yourself to your institution sector. That's the first point. The second point, I think what we have found very useful is often capacity building that's actually learning by doing, which requires years of actual work on the ground. You start with something simple, you continue, bring the stakeholders together, let them start doing it themselves. Sometimes with external expertise is required, but over time the external expertise reduces and the stakeholders becomes capacitated to do the work themselves. That learning by doing is very important. And the third thing which I strongly believe in is, I think the capacity building initiatives nowadays are too top heavy, which assumes we as external agencies know everything, which is not the case. There often you actually learn most when you interact with the communities, when you interact with the engineers on the ground, or the architects on the ground, or the planners on the ground. So how we can facilitate a capacity building that's not just top down, but equally bottom up, for us to learn from the practitioners and make sure that this kind of two-way learning process is facilitated. For me, these three things are very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I think both of you touched upon few very important points. Mr. Yadav, when you talked about the engagement with private sector, academia, and young professionals to build the capacity, I think that's a very good point. And the 3 points that Orgo highlighted are so very relevant. Projectized approach, one-off capacity building workshops, having a top-down approach where experts only deliver lectures and showcases innovative models but don't hear out the practitioners who are working on the ground doesn't work in long run, because they bring in a lot of learning from the practice, and it's extremely important to understand that when we want to provide very tailored support to the different countries. And I think the point on keep learning, because the risk landscape is changing, technology is changing, new innovations happening every day. So the training program cannot be the same program being run for years. It has to be relevant, it has to be very contextualized, and it has to be demand driven. So with this, maybe I move on to the next question, and which is again a broad, generic question for all the panelists. Because as I said, we're a new institution. A very important mandate that we have is to provide capacity building to support to our countries. So if CDRI has to design capacity building programs, what is the strategy that we should be adopting, and what are the areas where we need to focus upon? Maybe this time I can actually start with you.
Thank you. And I just wanted to echo that it's really great to be able to be here, and congratulations on the release of the report yesterday. It's been a great experience to be able to contribute to that through the technical advisory group as well. One thing, and I come from academia, so I think what's been highlighted already is really important to understand these limitations of what a single organization or entity can do in terms of building capacity, right? At some level, you just reach a limit in your own institutional capacity to do that, which means you need partnerships. So who are those partnerships? And one really important partnership, I think, is academic institutions, knowledge generators that are also potentially can be boundary organizations. And I wanted to use that term really intentionally as the kinds of institutes or centers that exist within academic institutions that can actually work with communities, help work between these like public-private partnerships, and serve as a boundary organization that can be a connector. And that connector isn't just about connection, it's actually about their own role in building capacity. So I think there's quite a bit of examples here, and I'll just give an example from New York very briefly, where the academic institutions, many academic institutions that exist within the New York context are working with the city of New York that have provided technical input for what are called the Climate Resilient Development Guidelines, or the CDRGs. These are amazing because they are given to every city agency, and they're guiding every development project in the city. But how are they developed? They're developed in a partnership with technical advisors, with the institutions. And then because the institutions have these relationships with the communities, we can actually advise the communities, provide capacity building there directly. So just to say, I think there's a number of types of partnerships that can be built where CDRI or other types of institutions are trying to build capacity at this sort of broad scale, can partner with lots of institutions that can actually work at the local scale. And there's great examples of how this can be effective.
No, thank you. I think at CDRI we already have the IRACS program, which is an initiative through which we actually strengthen our engagement with academia. More than 17 universities from across the coalition are member. What we are currently doing is delivering, training programs, developing online courses. But I think it's a great idea of engaging with academia to provide direct support to the government at the local level, to the cities. This is something we can definitely explore going forward when we talk about providing capacity building support. Maybe Chitembe, I request you to kindly share your reflections.
First, thank you so much for inviting us here, and it's a great discussion and a great panel, and very relevant to where we are at in the climate action space. I just want to build on to what has already been spoken. One of the things that we've seen work is when we integrate in cross-government support for training. You did already recognize that capacity for infrastructure resilience cuts across the engineers, the architects, but also what usually, in my experience, we forgot are the community people that allow for cross participation. how do we bring on board the community to understand that we need to do more? Because investments in infrastructure, whilst there are large investments that are made by governments, by big private investments, but there are also investments that are going to be made at individual level. How do we ensure they also have the relevant information, the relevant skills to understand that they need to be able to build the infrastructure which is resilient, because the climate has changed and they cannot rely on old techniques. And how can we also learn from them to build on that? So integrating that in the primary curriculum for primary school leavers, tertiary, secondary, if we can assist governments to do that, apart from the universities and colleges, it becomes much more broadly and more well invested across the countries, and it is more sustainable, and there's a lot of ownership that is provided to that. And of course, it's already recognized that across the institutions, we are recognizing that everyone wants to come up with a community of practice, or everyone wants to develop, but how do we make these communities of practices speak to each other, collaborate? The World Bank has one, Climate Investment Fund has got one, so how do we pull everyone to this one institution or similar, or provide the same information as much as possible? The alignment and coherence needs to be provided. So probably maybe that's one thing CDRI may wish to think through. It's not easy, but we need to be giving as much same information as possible across the institutions. Now, indeed.
No, thank you, Chidambi. I think you made two very important points: the curriculum development. As I mentioned about our IRAX program, that is also something we are working towards. There are many countries who actually ask to us what should be the model curriculum that should get embedded in the various engineering and architectural institutions to start with, to ensure that today's students who are in the universities actually learn what is infrastructure, resilient infrastructure. They actually develop the basic understanding of resilient infrastructure. And the second point that you talked about, how to align with the already existing community of practice. Yes, we are also talking about community of practice. We already have few, we are planning to launch few more, but it is very important to also align with the other community of practices. And SIF, we already have a cooperation agreement with you. We will be signing one very soon with Commonwealth Secretariat, and ADB is our partner, so as World Bank. So we really need to come together and see how to bring in alignment and how to see what we learn from each other. Maybe Orgo, one quick comment from you, and then, yeah.
If I can be slightly controversial over here, I think there is a trend, everybody wants to be the coordinator of the coordinators. Everybody wants to coordinate and bring people together. Maybe it's important to understand where is the actual value addition CDRI can bring. Because at the end of the day, this work has to happen country by country, sector by sector, project by project, right? It's a lot of work. So in that context, you can, as an institution, because of your access to so many member states, you can either act as a role of an enabler, as colleague was saying. Okay, you understand the need that countries have, and you're connecting the country the right kind of partner who would deliver that need. That's one model. Second is you're delivering the training, capacity building yourself through your own technical arm because you have in-house technical capacity. That's second model. The third model could be you're actually leveraging your partnerships. And what I mean by that is, for example, in our case or any MDB's case, a project sometimes has 5, 7, 10 years of implementation period. Now, if you actually work with us for the entire 10 years, let's say an urban water supply project, working in a municipality in Nepal, for example, for 7 years, if you're following that project throughout 7 years and actually building capacity of the municipal engineers, local governments who are all involved in the project, for me, that's very systemic. But it all depends on what's the objective you want to achieve, I guess so. Thanks.
No, thank you. I think excellent points that either you be the enabler, connect the right partners, or you deliver on your own, bring in the right expertise on the table, or you work with your partner, leverage their expertise, their project, and provide continuous support to have, long-term sustained efforts towards capacity building. Thank you very much, Orgo, for bringing those very important points. Maybe Mr. Yadav, a quick comment from your end.
Thank you so much. One of the very important point Argo has already covered in bringing the entire ecosystems together and leading to collaborations of all the players rather than competition or occupying the same space. Very fundamental point. But I just want to add to that how do you embed the technology? If you look at the aeroplane or the any places where the people are there, what they are seeing on their phone, what they are playing, I've noticed that many people who are traveling 10 hours, 12 hours in a flight, they're all playing games on their phone or on this one. So one very important concept which international organizations and the government keep missing is that gamification is the best way to learn. If you are able to gamify any developmental learning journey, you are able to attract the people. But if you say most of the international organization, this is the mandatory course, this is this kind of a course, you do it. So that itself dips the interest of the participant and it is like a burden. So how do you make it interesting, whether it's X course or Y course? If you're able to do that, you are able to reach that threshold which you needed. The second point I want to say is that a lot of developments are happening. ADB, World Bank. If you see all the institutions, after every project, they have their, CLR review, many other factors coming in. How do you embed those journeys on a continuous basis? If your new learning comes from any part of the world, your learning system, micro learning system, is able to alert me that this is a new learning in this area. Would you like to do it? It's a micro learning, 2 minutes, 3 minutes, 5 minutes. And I'm able to update my knowledge into that space and keep abreast with the things. And the next point I would like to say that in most of this technological pace and most of the development pace, we forget about the indigenous knowledge, that what are the indigenous knowledge in the various sectors. How do you embed that indigenous knowledge? If you're able to do that in linking the entire ecosystem, CDRI, your 5-pillar approach is a fantastic approach. But if you're able to top up these couple of elements more, I think you will be top of the institution delivering some which other international organizations have not done it. So wish you all the best. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Suresh. If I may summarize, gamification, bite-sized learning, and capturing the indigenous knowledge could be some of the best ways to build capacities of the various professionals. Savina and then Ede. Yeah.
Thank you, Ranjini, and nice to be back. This is becoming my home pavilion rapidly, and I'm happy to share my thoughts. So, in the last 7 years, I've actually been reflecting upon and implementing capacity building and development of guidance. So I do have a lot of thoughts on this, and I'm an engineer, and my organization works with engineers. So my thoughts will be primarily directed at the engineering professionals. I, as a practitioner after almost 20 years in the private sector, I kind of know that engineering professionals think in a certain way, and they would particularly appreciate structured learning around the life cycle of infrastructure. I mean, that's kind of how, so particularly for the engineering professionals, the design, construction, O&M, but I think the life cycle is a framework where you can actually bring all of the stakeholders together, and you already do this to an extent in CDRI. So that's one thing. The other thing is the capacity gap. That obviously we were the agency rolling out the global infrastructure resilience survey. So we talked to so many people from very different countries. And the capacity gap is, as we say, is very variable. And every country, I would say, I personally spoke to experts in Latin America. Every country in Latin America has got a different level of maturity. In Costa Rica, for example, the professional institution of engineers is really strong. They are embedded in the infrastructure development. They are supported by the government. So in that case, you would have an easy, way into Costa Rica if you were to work with the professional association in Costa Rica for the engineers. And this is not the same for other countries in Latin America. And that's only just an example. Because in your GIR report, which is fantastic and was launched yesterday, you do mention professional associations are potential partners, right, to kind of roll this out. Because what you want to do, you want to roll this out. We want to be, multiplying the knowledge product that you produce. But I think, as Argo was saying, it's not one way that you can roll out capacity building. It is always going to be a mix of strategies. And the professional associations are certainly credible partners, but I would also say that professional associations, again, have varying degrees of reach in different countries. Their membership is not all active, so the professional associations are not necessarily, not all of them will realize, like the type of objectives that you've got in mind. So there is, I think, a bit of mapping to do, I think, in terms of professional association and which disciplines in which countries as well.
So the structured approach towards capacity building following the life cycle of the infrastructure. At CDRI, of course, we are promoting this common framework of capacity to absorb, respond, and recover. Probably we identify the stakeholders and then impart very targeted, tailored capacity building programs for them. And of course, engagement with the professional associations in different countries. Thank you, Savina. Ede.
Thank you, Ranjini, and good morning to everybody. I'll come out very clearly because I have a very particular bias on this topic. So I have been working on the issue of community of practice for a long time, and I have come to realize that many institutions don't put communities of practice at the center, and by not doing that, then you're not flipping the equation of knowledge management, capacity building, knowledge generation, etc. Because when you are working through communities of practice, you are bringing practitioners that will tell you, this is what we need. And therefore, the demand generation of what is truly needed on the ground needs to be worked there. So that's point number one. I think that by moving from the supply side to a demand side model becomes really important for an institution like CDRI to transform itself in that process. Second, many institutions artificially create internal barriers between the groups that are writing reports, the knowledge management teams, the capacity building teams that do the training, the communication teams that put all of the knowledge, bite-sized learning and the communication. And therefore, organizations don't see this as part of a single spectrum of activities that get connected for people to learn in different ways that process. Some people just want the 2 minutes summary. Some people want the 300-page and 6-month course that they want to go deep into this process. Third, learn the idea also that you are, as an institution, telling people what is it that they need to do is completely wrong. The ability of having committees of practice where you have 51 countries that are struggling with very similar problems, because resilience is, in a way, a new topic, and therefore everybody's learning as they go, and therefore you have a unique potential for a global laboratory of lessons learning, that you don't wait necessarily for 7 years, as you were saying, but actually you continuously exchange knowledge among the communities of practice of what is it, I'm struggling with this, who else is struggling with this, and then you become a lab of solutions that are co-developed by these communities of practice. And while it all may sound very logical, it is extremely difficult to do, because you are devolving power and agency to the people who are working on the ground on resilience. I'll conclude with one final thought, which is, in a way, every country also needs to have these communities of practice. So the Indonesia Disaster Risk Management Agency, for example, decided that they were having disasters all the time, and they were having people rotating in and out of the agency, and they were not capturing the knowledge of what was happening. And therefore, they began and saying, we need to create our own knowledge management system and our own communities of practice, so that we are learning from every disaster that is happening, the response that we're doing, the lessons that we're doing, so that then it becomes a way to influence policy, a way to ask for the universities on what to do research, a way to influence the curricula for that, but it is grounded on the realities of what is happening. So I recognize always that I come with a very strong bias towards communities of practice as the center of influencing the research, the knowledge management, the agendas, Finally, a pitch that a lot of the capacity building and knowledge management, all that in many organizations is done by professionals on resilience that don't know too much about knowledge management, capacity building, pedagogical processes, and all that. Okay, sorry, now we're back. Pedagogical issues, and therefore many of these courses are designed by professionals that are experts on resilience that have no clue how do you learn. That the knowledge management tools are not bringing the best tools, that they're not using new technologies for learning and embedding that are the good, and therefore institutions really need to have those or bring in that expertise that is as complicated and as difficult as resilience itself.
No, thank you, Ade. So I really like it's a kind of a quotable quote is that community of practice becomes the lab for solutions. So at CDRI we have made some baby steps in the sense that we are trying to reach out to the countries which have been struck recently by disaster and have meetings with them to understand what were the challenges, what were the kind of damage happened, how infrastructure services failed, how much time they took to recover. It's a baby step we are making, but we want to take it forward in a much bigger way, that we capture the learnings after every disaster and then share it with the countries having similar context and geographical context. That's number one. I also like the point you made that the entire spectrum, like capacity building team, knowledge management team, communication, and the program team, they need to come together when we talk about capacity development, and it shouldn't be very siloed. Bang on the point of learning instructor. So we have, like, it's extremely important to have instruction designers when you design any course. One is the technical experts definitely bring in the technical knowledge, the content part of it, but we also need to engage with learning management specialists to see how we need to deliver it so that people are able to absorb it much easily and comprehend it and apply it in practice. So that's very good points. I think now maybe because Savina, you talked about a structured approach towards learning following the entire life cycle of infrastructure. So if you can tell us that what kind of paradigm shift is needed, because currently it is all about capacity building programs, training programs design, you engage with large number of practitioners, bring in experts, do group exercises, all that. What are the new ways we can do capacity building?
Thank you, Ranjini. I wanted to bring an example of a capacity building model that we are using that we borrowed from the healthcare sector. And it's called Project Echo, and it's basically the creation of micro community of practice around a specific issue. So you're bringing together this micro community of practice that is interested in discussing a specific issue. In our case, in this moment, we've got an ongoing learning hub on transforming the engineering curriculum, where we have academics and we got private sector practitioners because we want to bridge academia and private and job market gap. And so basically they're meeting periodically and they are forming a bit of a peer support network, a little bit like what you were saying right now. You need to have community of practice, at different levels. And so this is something that we're experimenting with because we see it as a periodic convening. Every 2 weeks we meet. And after now 6 convenings, we've formed this kind of quite tight-knit group of people that really trust each other. And they want to share their experiences and discussing their issues and so forth. And this is actually following a pedagogic and didactic model where you have a case-based learning, someone that kind of presents a case, a practical case, and we've got a technical presentation. And then the community goes into breakout sessions where they share, their thoughts and they kind of like, so this is a new model. And the reason why we're experimenting with this is because in the healthcare sector, has been demonstrated through doctors sharing case-based, with clinicians, has been demonstrated as being booming. In the COVID, that's how doctors understood and learned how to deal with COVID using this specific model. So that's something that we're experimenting with and see whether, the technical people can actually also deal with this because there is such a human component in trusting, sharing, learning from others that perhaps the technical specialists are less experienced in.
Yeah, no, thank you. I really like that point, Savina, the human component in it, because you have to build the trust so that people come forward and start sharing the knowledge, the gaps, and the solutions. And also the case based learning. So that's excellent. That's also an excellent point. That's a very good approach when, particularly, you work with practitioners who themselves come with a lot of experience. So instead of making it a very top down approach, we can engage with them through different ways and try to kind of extract the knowledge, the skills, the experience that they have. Maybe Orgo, because ADB implements so many programs across the countries, and this is a very typical request which we receive from countries, right? We need capacity building support. So how you have been doing it? Is there any innovative way we can do this? We also receive a lot of requests from member countries, come and deliver a capacity building program for us, for transport sector, for water sector. Is there any suggestion that you might have for us, how we can do it a little more innovatively and in a sustained manner?
We do it a lot. I am not going to sit away and claim that we do perfectly. I don't think so. Specifically in the resilience space, I think our approach for capacity building has largely been by providing technical assistance to countries that are implemented through a set of expert consulting firms, whether national or international. And for me, while of course it adds value, in the resilience space, I don't think that's enough. And that's why I was saying, for me, what is more important is, I think building on Savina's case, is by looking at a case. Now, the case need not be actually just a case study, it could be an actual project, right? And you follow through the project, because the problem I feel that in the resilience space, what's happening is, in our case, when we approve a project, we think we have integrated resilience consideration in so and so manner. But when we are implementing the project for next 5 years, 7 years, because the risk landscape is changing, many of our initial assumptions, I'm not sure how much is following through. So unless you really follow through a project and sit with the municipal engineers and project designers and the PIU heads, etc., to see what's being implemented, what's not being implemented, and why it is not being implemented, what are the bottlenecks? Is it a capacity? Is it a policy issue, regulatory issue? It's just a behavioral issue. We don't know also, right? So I think unless you follow through, and I don't think in our system we have yet developed a mechanism of following through each project and providing capacity building, but happy to explore with you guys on that and see how we can perhaps work together. Thanks.
No, I think that's a very important point, that how the project itself can be a case for learning. So we learn through we look at the entire project period and see what emerged from it, and that itself become a learning for the practitioner. So very good point. Professor Fierson, if I may come to you, you mentioned about the academic engagement, how academia engaged and supported local authorities. But what are the other different ways through which we can engage with academia? Because we already have this whole program of engaging with academia for strengthening resilience. So what are the other different ways academia can help? Some insights from you are based on the experience that you have.
Thank you. I wanted to pick up on one of the points that Arya made actually very early, which is this importance of sustained engagement. And I think this is one of the roles where academia, because there are so many of these institutions in every city, in every state, in every country around the world that have relationships with their communities. Not all are the same, not all are as well engaged as others. But I think there's a real importance of sustaining this kind of peer learning and this engagement on the ground. How is CDRI actually going to be able to do that? I think the partnerships with academia is one of those opportunity spaces where these, in some cases, actually communities of practice exist through these collaborations that academia has with the private space, with the public space, especially with city and state actors, but also on the ground with indigenous knowledge holders, with various types of communities that they're engaging with because they're reaching out through training or education or because they're in active collaborative research. And so I'll give you a little bit of an example of this. This is some work that we're doing in multiple cities around the world, with the city of Cape Town, with South Africa, with Copenhagen, with New York City, for example, where we have long-term projects that we're working on around resilient infrastructure, in these cases usually around nature-based infrastructure. And we hear the same thing. We hear that there's a lack of capacity, a lack of knowledge. But what the research community can do is not only generate new knowledge, sustain that engagement process because they're on the ground already, but they can also be involved in this monitoring and evaluation. And I haven't really heard that come up, but the point was just made about following the project through. And I think one of the things we've heard, and we're launching a major report on Thursday called the Global Roadmap for Urban Nature-Based Solutions. This is the first global assessment of its kind. One of the major key findings out of that is the lack of technical knowledge and capacity to know how to implement nature-based infrastructure. And the second, that there's no serious, sustained, on-the-ground monitoring and evaluation and learning. So this call for iterative, being responsive, learning from what works, we're really missing that. And I think there's a role for academia to play as part of a larger set of a community of practice that can learn from each other. And so just to kind of, obviously I'm coming from a biased perspective there being within the academic institutions, but I think there's more work that we can do, and CDRI definitely has a role to play.
Yeah. So if I heard you correctly, basically a very important role that academia can play is to bridge the knowledge gap by conducting in-depth research and also kind of capture the learning from the ground and also to help in the overall monitoring of how things are progressing on ground. So I think that is something academia can definitely do. And yes, as I mentioned, we have this IRAX program, an initiative where we are engaging with academia to work on several of these issues. Chidembe, if I can come to you for a quick reflection on how CDRI and SIF can work together to, take some of these actions together on ground. Like any quick thoughts from your end? I know you have just signed the cooperation, but you can, if you want to reflect very quickly on what are the opportunities that are available for us to work together and take forward some of these messages that we got today.
Thanks. The opportunities are many. One of the things I need to mention is for the SIF, we implement through the multilateral development banks, and ADB being one of them. So much of the capacity building, the learning, the heavy lift is really undertaken by the multilateral development banks. However, we do have our own learning and evaluation and knowledge management support, which we give to the countries in collaboration with the MDBs. So using such platforms, and as I earlier mentioned, we do not need to be replicating what CDRI goes to the same countries, SIF goes to the same countries. Part of the reason we're collaborating is we found ourselves working in similar contexts in the same countries. So doing works together, we already did the nature-based solutions trainings in some of the countries. We can bring that kind of experience, we put it together and now feed it into the infrastructure perspective. It was broadly just on nature-based solutions. How do countries plan for it? How does the private sector see opportunities in nature-based solutions? How do you design a project that responds to that? But that was so broad. And then we see the value of collaborating with CDRI to bring in the infrastructure perspective. So those are some of the ways we can collaborate on. And we do have a resilience series platform, which is again very broad, but I like what I'm hearing here and what I've also seen in the health sector. They do just have climate and health. So the discussions are more detailed. It talks to the practitioners that surround climate and health. And therefore, working with CDRI, we are seeing a more focused approach on infrastructure. How do we support the countries have this kind of learning, integration? How do they monitor? How do they report? Argo did mention when there are changes in temperatures which they did not foresee at the time of designing the project, what are the measures that they can do before so much time goes on? Those are things that I see we can really do and work together.
Yeah. So if I have to summarize, learning and knowledge management is something, definitely an area where CDRI and SIF can collaborate and work together. The last question that I have is for Ede. Ede, as you are aware, we already have a platform, we call it DRI Connect, which is the learning and knowledge management platform of CDRI. We are a new institution. It is operational, but there is a lot to be done to make it more vibrant and functional. So any kind of quick suggestions, insights from you on how we can make this platform very vibrant and how we keep it very functional and useful. So it becomes, our ambition is to make it a one-stop shop for infrastructure resilience. So how do we work towards it?
Thank you, Ranjini. And I'm sorry to sound like a broken record, but if you have active communities of practice that shape what is in the platform and how it operates, right there you are starting from the demand to see what is there. So point number one. Point number two, one of the challenges in capacity building and knowledge management is that there's no, organizations don't tend to have very clear indicators of success. What success means like, and how do you actually embed the clarity of those objectives into the participants and to be able to monitor as you achieve it. Because it's not the number of webinars that you have, it's not the number of documents that you have, it's not the number of downloads that you have. It is really the transformations, the behavioral changes, the policy changes that happen because of that knowledge. And therefore, that is extremely difficult to measure if you don't have a community of practice that is able to monitor, measure, tell the stories, report back in that direction. Third, technology is changing rapidly. You may not remember, but before COVID, we rarely used or rarely felt comfortable with video conferences. Now everybody is like a Zoom in the phone running around is completely normal. And therefore, I think that being on the frontier of the technological change, being able to see how AI is now able to completely transform. So for example, after this seminar, you pass it through AI and you have a 3-minute video summary that in a knowledge size, bite size, come and say, this is what happens in the way in which virtual reality is going to change your way to absorb knowledge and how the platform begin to be at the frontier of experimentation. That becomes really fundamental. And I'll finish with also a lot of the lessons learned cannot be learned through conversations, you have to go and see. And therefore, the mechanism of what used to be called South-South knowledge exchange, I think that is, after COVID, it became underutilized. And many people just don't like it's too much investment to go to a place. I think that building, again, the capacity of those who are going to be hosting those knowledge exchanges in a way that really leads to better learning outcomes, that lead to better action on the ground, is really critical. And therefore, I think that the platform cannot be seen again as something on the web that people will link to. It has to break across silos in the institution to be able to come and connect in completely different ways, and it needs to use technology in ways that process all that information, written, spoken, or tacit, into ways that people can learn and engage in that direction. Thank you.
No, thank you, Ede. I can't agree with you more. Application of technology. We really need to apply technology to kind of bring knowledge and learning in a very easy format to people. I fully agree. The whole concept of bite-sized learning, it is very effective. It is very useful, particularly when it comes to practitioners. And then, of course, clear indicators of success, clear indicators of monitoring the behavioral changes, because it is not only about organizing webinars, events, on producing knowledge products. What we really need to measure is whether at all these are making any changes on the ground. Professor, Mr. Yadav, I think you wanted to make a point, right? Yeah, please.
I just wanted to, what Ed mentioned and what I said in the beginning, that how do you blend the technology, how do you bring the various AI developed tools and the large language models on that. And I think that the future of learning is going to be completely different, right? All the institutions are making their own learning program. And to be very honest, the government officials don't have time. Even if you do an in-person capacity building, they struggle to attend your incapacity because they have to respond to the parliament, they have to respond to their minister and to their bosses. So getting their time to learn, to acquire new skills is very, very challenging. Now, if you look at any of the platforms which sells you the product, if you look at the Amazon, if you look at any other product, the way they pick up your habit, the way they want to learn the trend from you, I think the collaborative platforms of all the international organizations, learning agencies have to come together where they should be in a position to convert the thinking and the demand of a person to convert into a generative learning on the demand, not necessarily a program which is fixed program, but a program which customized, tailor-made to my requirement at the moment. So I think that is an era, that is an direction where the world is heading, and all the international organization, all the universities needs to come together there to think that how do you get that nanosecond or millisecond of the time people have to think and find the solution. So that's my message in this. Thank you very much for very fantastic discussion. Thank you.
Thank you for kind of highlighting two very important points: the need for collaboration, because there are several actors and all are kind of designing different kind of initiatives. We have to avoid repetition. We have to avoid siloed approach. We need to come together, particularly when we are members or we are working together. It is all the more important. And of course, it has to be demand driven and tailored, because you are very right. Whenever we also organize programs, it is very difficult to get the right official in the room for attending a 3-day program, although he has the intent, but he doesn't have the time, to be there with us for 3 full day to build his capacities. With this, maybe we'll come to the end to the first part of the panel discussion, but I will request all the panelists to be there with us for 5 more minutes, because my colleague, in case any one of you will have to leave, please feel free to do that. But we are just going to make a very brief presentation. My colleague Raina Singh will do that. We are announcing a course on urban water infrastructure resilience module that we have developed in collaboration with Deltares, and Raina will help us to quickly go through the module. So over to you, Raina.
Thank you very much, Ranjini. My name is Raina Singh. I'm the lead specialist for the Global Infrastructure Resilience Report that was just released yesterday. I'm also supporting CDRI in capacity building activities, so very pleased to be introducing this module that has been a result of a very consultative process that happened over more than a year. Just seeking some technological support. So for those of you who may not be aware, CDRI has an urban infrastructure resilience program, which was launched at COP28 2 years ago in Dubai. The objective of this program is to provide project preparation support to CDRI member countries, which happens through a very competitive, proposal submission process. A core component of this program is also to support countries and cities in building their capacities on urban infrastructure resilience, and this is, the target group for this is practitioners, planners, policymakers, and government officials who are working at the city level. This module that is being prepared under this program that we are just launching today is basically both an online as well as an offline training module. Next, please. So as I was mentioning that this module was developed over the course of more than a year, it has been a very, very consultative process. It started in March 2024, where there was an online as well as in-person consultation, which happened with practitioners who are based in India in person, but a lot of practitioners and city-level officials across the globe in an online form. The module has been developed with support from Deltares, together with Deltares with support from the government of Netherlands, and as a result of this consultative process, there were 4 key themes which were identified in addition to the generic module on awareness and awareness generation. So one, which is focusing on risk assessment. Next, on nature-based solutions. So the first step is where cities are able to utilize tools and follow an approach how they can identify risks at the city level when it comes to urban water resilience, harnessing nature-based solutions, green, blue, as well as hybrid solutions which can help cities in building resilience for water resilience. Then governance aspects, looking at policy planning processes, but also in terms of codes and standards, in terms of how do cities bring about the coordination between different agencies and the leadership that is needed at the city level. And finally, in terms of sustainable finance, what are the options which are available? How can cities develop bankable projects? Next, please. There was a pilot in-person training conducted just last month together with Deltares. This was done in India again, but it had representatives coming in from other South Asian countries. So we had city level officials and practitioners coming in from India, Bhutan, Nepal, and Sri Lanka. The idea was to test this module before it is launched and it is operationalized fully, and also to get their feedback in terms of last minute refinements which are needed in order to ensure that this module is actually what is going to help practitioners in terms of addressing some of their needs and some of their technical capacity gaps. Next, as a way forward, CDRI is going to make this live. The online training module will be available at DRI Connect from December. We are also planning to launch it in person in CDRI member countries. Additionally, cities which are supported through the Urban Infrastructure Resilience Program, they will also get opportunity. There will be like deep dive workshops and training activities which will be conducted with them. And the idea is that CTRI Secretariat alone cannot actually operationalize and implement this. So, like some of the speakers said, it is only useful when there are there are ways in which we can facilitate engagement, when there are ways that we can have partners roll this out further for amplifying the effect, amplifying the the result that is actually required from this training module. So these are some of the things that we are going to be doing in the months in the way forward in the coming months, and some of the fantastic ideas that we've heard today are actually something which are going to really help us in sustaining this engagement and ensuring that we actually have the we are able to amplify the impact that we want. So you can access this module online on DRI Connect through this QR code, and this will be fully available starting December. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Raina. So this is going to be a self-paced course, approximately of 15 hours. And once the entire course is completed, a certificate will be issued by Government of Netherlands, Deltares, and CTRI. So by first week of December, this course will be available online, and we encourage all the relevant stakeholders to undergo this course. And also we request our partner organization to help us disseminate the information related to this course and also take it to the various partners and networks with whom you are working and encourage them to undergo the courses. So with this, may we come to an end of this panel discussion. I would like to thank each of the panelists for their wonderful interventions that they made. It's going to be very useful for us, and it will definitely inform our internal capacity building strategy and the way we take forward our work on capacity building in future. Maybe we do a photo, Raina, a group photo? Yeah. Thank you. Thank you once again for joining us. Thank you.